If you solve a problem for 5 people, you have friends. Solve for 1 million, you make money. Solve for 1 billion, you change history. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Baby doesn't wake up and go, today I shall walk across the room. They get up, they fall, they get up, they fall. It's like when you play a video game. You hit that wall, you just can't get past it, and you work and work and work, and you finally get past that obstacle, and guess what? There's another obstacle. That's what business is like. So Bill Gates and Paul Allen's first company failed. Their second company was called Microsoft and made him the richest man in the world. Steve Jobs built the first trillion-dollar company. Steve was a guy who could hustle. You don't need a special skill, you don't need a special degree. So you only need 2 things for success: insight and perseverance. Everything else can be hired.
Hello, Jay. It's nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Hello from Poland, which is very snowy, cloudy, and quite cold now. How is it in LA? LA, right?
Sunny California. It's beautiful.
It's balanced. You have warm, we have cold. Everything is perfect. I asked you to chat about your book, your amazing book, which is finally in Polish in Poland. Polish title is Sztuka Autoreformy, Jay Samit. So the question is, you are a super successful entrepreneur. You probably could not work it at all. So why actually you spend time writing a book? What's the mission of yours being as author?
So I was very lucky. I didn't set out to be this entrepreneur. I got out of college when there were no jobs. So just like you have young kids, I had young kids, and you had to figure it out. And I've built billion-dollar companies, and I've had hundreds of thousands of employees. And if you would have told me growing up as a poor working class kid that dozens of friends would become billionaires, I didn't know what a millionaire was. And I noticed a pattern. And these people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Richard Branson and Elon Musk, I knew them before they were household names. Most of them aren't different than you or I. They're not smarter. They didn't come from the right family. So what is it that they're doing differently? And I realized that could be taught. And so I started teaching it at the university level. I had students one semester that did $100 million. So it can be taught. And let's face it, the only people that create jobs are entrepreneurs. And this pandemic has globally wiped out the middle class. And the only thing that makes countries safe and life stable is a strong middle class. I mean, Poland's seen the history of this from what it was like in communism. I mean, so I've dedicated whatever years I have left to teaching people how to do this, because it's not that hard. It's just most people don't have a roadmap.
There's so many interesting things and thoughts you wrote in the book. I write down some interesting for me. So like, oh my God. So the first thing you mentioned was stop loving your ideas, stop falling in love with your own ideas, which is like interesting because in one point of view, you need to be excited about the ideas. And from the second part, you need to be very critique to make sure you are standing on the ground, not only in the clouds. So could you please elaborate about this idea for a while?
Yeah, more entrepreneurs are ruined by praise than saved by criticism. You know, if you have an idea for a startup, don't ask your grandmother, is it a good idea? She's going to pat you on the head and say, oh, that's such a good idea. Go to potential customers. Will they spend money? And if they say no, ask them why.
Why?
Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to find all the problems with your idea. The market is very efficient. But wouldn't you rather find out the problems before you spend your money, before you spend your time? So the more iterations you can do in your head, the better you can do it. So what I teach people is you need to kill your idea. Find every reason why it sucks. And the more you can do that, when you finally come up with an idea that can't be killed, what I call a zombie idea, then you'll see how easy it is to raise money. You'll see how easy it is to get employees that want to join your dream, because people can't find a reason why it won't work. And there's no shortage of capital. We're one click away on our phones from 5 billion customers. You only have to be right once for a nanosecond to make millions of dollars. Every 32 hours, there's a self-made billionaire. Think about that. I don't know what you did this past weekend, but you're a slacker. You didn't make $1 billion. So this is
Gosh.
what people figured out. And I've watched it again and again. And I teach people how to get those ideas in the book, my 3 problems a day for 30-day method. And I've seen people do this and come out with an idea and turn it into a business that changes lives. The other mistake that people think is they think entrepreneurs sell things. They don't. They solve things. If you solve a problem for 5 people, you have friends. Solve for 1 million, you make money. Solve for 1 billion, you change history. And we live in a time where we're also interconnected. We can literally change the planet with our ideas. That's the most exciting thing that I can think of.
Many people gonna listen to the interview and they will think, okay, it's easy to say to Jake, he's living in LA, he's super famous, he wrote a book and so on. And you're saying it's easy. What does it mean? It's easy. Where we can find this money, how we can spot the right problem to solve, or is about the numbers of problems we solve and one of it gonna be super great?
So the one benefit that came out of this horrible pandemic is the world finally accepted the idea of remote workers. For thousands of years, you had to hire the best people that lived within 5 or 10 kilometers of your business, right? Now you can hire the best people in the world, which means there's no advantage of somebody being in Silicon Valley or being in Warsaw or being in a third world country. We're all a level playing field. And you have equal access to capital. You don't have to raise capital in your city. You have crowdfunding globally. There's no gatekeeper stopping you from getting funding. So it all starts with, what is that problem that you're solving? And so I tell people, write down today 3 problems in your life. If you don't have any problems, I can't help you. But we all have problems. And so you'll write down your 3 problems. Let's say traffic's one of them. But I ask you to do this every day for a month. So the first couple of days, it's easy. After 2 or 3 days, most people go, I have no problems. Because we live our life on autopilot. We don't think through the inconvenience moment by moment. So the traffic, there were 2 guys in their car in Tel Aviv. I think Warsaw has worse traffic, okay? But it was traffic. LA's got worse. And they said, wait a second. The phone company knows where my phone is. If they tell me to go left and the other guy to go right, there's no more traffic. That was the beginning of Waze. Just that one idea. A reader of mine who I've become friends with was taking his medicine one morning and the phone rang. Gets off the phone and goes, wait a second, did I take my pill? If I took my pill and I take it again, that's not good for me. And if I don't take it and I didn't take it, that's not good for me. A problem. So he starts thinking about this. He ends up taking a kid's toy watch, puts it on the lid. So every time you open it, says how many minutes. Oh, I opened it 3 minutes ago. Yes, I took it. Oh, I haven't opened it for 8 hours. No, I didn't. Then he added Bluetooth. So now you could check whether grandma opened her medicine and took her medicine, and you can call her. And he sold millions of these timer caps just from a basic little problem. My favorite one this year was an 18-year-old girl. Okay. I don't know if they have science fair in high schools in Poland where you make little experiments.
Yeah.
I was the classic make a baking soda and vinegar volcano. Okay. I didn't take it seriously. But this girl realized that the number 4 cause of death in the US is hospitals, not disease, being in a hospital, infection. Make a long story short, she figured out the wounds when you have surgery get infected. What if you made stitches, sutures that change color if they're infected?
Oh, great.
Her parents weren't doctors. They weren't scientists. She played with vegetables of different pH balance. Anyway, she was smart enough to patent it at 18. Not only has she made millions before she graduates high school, but she's saving millions of lives. So when I say it's that easy, I can sum up the book in one sentence. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Right? Everybody thinks of changing the world, but nobody thinks of changing themselves. And we all have these limiting beliefs that I can't do this, I couldn't do this, and your parents and your teachers pretty much told you you can't, because they gave up on their dreams. and they don't want to have you feel the pain of failing. Well, failing is part of the process. A baby doesn't wake up and go, today I shall walk across the room. They get up, they fall, they get up, they fall. It's like when you play a video game. You hit that wall. You just can't get past it, and you work and work and work, and you finally get past that obstacle, and guess what? There's another obstacle. That's what business is like. So once you realize that failing is part of it, you will fail forward. Walt Disney's first company went bankrupt. Henry Ford's first company went bankrupt. My favorite one was when I was at the beginning of my career. There were two guys who I thought were really smart, and they had the idea of talking about traffic, of hook up traffic lights to a computer to synchronize cities and get rid of traffic. It was called Trafo Data. Brilliant, except for one thing. No city planner understood what they were talking about. The company went belly up. So Bill Gates and Paul Allen's first company failed. Their second company was called Microsoft and made him the richest man in the world. So don't stop because you fail. When you fail, you don't end up where you started. You either earn if you're successful or you learn. But either way, you're further along in your journey to success.
So you mentioned a few amazing names like Bill Gates, for example. And, people are watching this interview and there's Marcin, there's Bill Gates, and there's a huge gap between them. So how would you recommend them to be a step closer to the idea or be the number one in the project? Because maybe, some of them have problem with the first step, and maybe there's like thousands of steps to be taken.
So one thing that people have to realize is this image of the self-made person, man or woman, isn't true. Nobody built $1 billion company by themselves, okay? So you're going to need a series of mentors. And LinkedIn is a great tool for finding those mentors and for reaching out to people. Now, you don't just email a stranger and go, will you be my mentor? That's like walking to a bar and saying, hey, will you have my baby? It doesn't work, okay?
Sometimes it works, but
then you've got a better game than I ever had. But what you really want to do is find somebody in the field that you want to excel in that's a couple steps above, and you'll see the people want to help you. In school, we were taught business was this, I buy a banana for $1 and I sell it to you for $2, and that's how I make money. While true, that isn't how the world works, because that implies what's called a zero-sum game in game theory, that there's only so much money and either you have it or I have it, and it's a fight for who gets the money. When in fact, entrepreneurs create money out of thin air. Let me describe what I mean. I sold my last startup for $200 million. So if I was starting a new one and I said, I'll give you 10% for $10,000, and you say, yeah, go, what do I now have? I have $10,000 in cash and $90,000 in equity. I can hire people with that equity. I can buy things with that. I made that money out of thin air. So when you see what Jeff Bezos has created with Amazon, he didn't take that money from people. He literally created the money. It wasn't created by a government. And so people want to help you. People see the value in solving more problems and aiding. And when you realize that the world is on your side, it's a lot less lonely and a lot easier to find that team. And a great idea, when you kill that idea, when you get that zombie idea, it attracts moths like to a flame. When I sold my first startup, this was the beginning of the internet, I had this idea that the internet could give people equal access to knowledge. And I started writing about this. And make a long story short, one day I got a call from the President of the United States, Bill Clinton at the time, thought this was a great idea, come to the White House. And the president's calling me, this is insane. And he said, go do this. Let's put the internet in every classroom. One problem, we don't have a penny in taxpayer money. Figure it out. So I came up with this idea of let's do an auction to raise money, just like you would do with charity things. That auction evolved into what you know as eBay. But the idea was so big, all these people that volunteered became famous people. And I remember when we had this press event with the president and the vice president pulling wires in a school to announce we were doing this. The White House photographers taking pictures all day. And about a month later, I get this signed photo of me and the president and this other guy, thanking me. And I'm like, man, I wish it was just the two of us. Who's this other guy? But it's the president. So it hangs on my wall. About a decade goes by and people go, oh, you're friends with Eric Schmidt? He was then unemployed. He would go on to be the chairman of Google. So big ideas will attract big minds. So I didn't set out to know all these people. I'm no different than you or any of the readers. When you work on things that change the world, you meet world-changing people.
So you advise us to first spot problems, and then try to find a solution, or by only spotting and noticing there's a problem in my life, I can solve it, or maybe there are more people who need help with the idea. So if I solve my problem, I can help them solve their problems, and that will attract other people, resources, money, and etc. to help me grow bigger in an organic way.
And realize Steve Jobs built the first $1 trillion company. Okay, Apple was the first company worth $1 trillion. And everybody hearing my voice today has written as much code as Steve did. Zero. Steve wasn't an engineer. Wozniak was an engineer, probably one of the smartest guys, knew more about computers at that moment than anybody. Steve was a guy who could hustle. So you don't need a special skill. You don't need a special degree. What you need is to not give up. Everything you own, that shirt you're wearing, your favorite book, your favorite movie, everything was created by somebody that was stubborn, somebody that didn't give up and stop. And the only person that can stop you is you. So once you realize that you are able to change, changing the rest of the world is much easier than changing that voice that says, I can't do this.
Can you tell us a bit more about how you understand hustle? I know this word, that's why I want you to elaborate about this idea a bit more.
It's figuring out every path till you get to where you want to go. So when I had a young video game company, back then, video games just had beeps, beep, 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 beep. And PCs were getting sound cards. And it dawned on me, video games would be so much better with a rock and roll soundtrack with real music. Now, at this time in my life, I knew nobody in the music industry. I knew nothing how that did. But I thought, not only was this a great idea, but who else would this help? And it would help Microsoft because more people would play games on a PC. So not knowing Bill Gates, I sent him a letter. It got to him, and I was asking him of a favor. Nothing from him. Would he reach out to the most successful man in the music industry, a guy named David Geffen, and ask him to take a meeting with me? And Bill Gates did this. And I ended up partnering with Geffen. He's the guy who signed John Lennon and the Eagles and, was the center of the music industry. And I had my biggest hit game of all time. Funny story, Aerosmith, I don't know if they're popular in Poland.
Yeah, of course.
Aerosmith has made more money from being in video games than from all their album sales.
Wow, I didn't know about it.
And I put them in the first game and they were terrific to work with. So you get an idea and you just don't give up. So hustle is figuring out any which way. There were guys that had an apartment in San Francisco. They couldn't pay their rent. They were broke. They didn't give up. They were saying, what do we got to do to, make some money? And Macworld, the Apple convention, was coming to town and all the hotels were full.
Airbnb.
Yeah. So they said, we'll get some air mattresses. We'll rent some stuff out. And they go, wait a second, this makes money. And that was Airbnb. I mean, it just starts with that problem. Reed Hastings, we used to have a chain called Blockbuster in the US that rented videos. And one day he forgot to return his video and they wanted $40 in late fees. And he was so mad. He goes, there has to be a better way. His better way was Netflix. So it was problems that start these things. And our world is filled with problems. There's no shortage of problems. So there's no shortage of solutions. One of the ones that was in my new book Every parent can relate to this. It's the middle of the school week. It's late at night, and her 8th grade, her teenage girl, had to make a poster for school, and she messed it up. And she's going, Mommy, go back to the store. Get me another sheet of poster board, please, please, please. And the mom relents. And then she says, before I give it to her, I'm going to take a ruler and make little thin lines so she can write nice on it. And the next morning, she's like, why don't they sell posters like this? Well, she went out and got a patent for putting little thin lines on a piece of poster board, went to the biggest company in the US that sells this. She makes $5 million a year with no employees. So it's just solving things. Jack Ma
Alibaba.
started Alibaba. I met Jack real early on. Jack finally admitted Alibaba was 5 years old before he owned a PC or knew how to turn it on. He knew China was huge, the internet was huge. He was going to put himself there. Everything else you can hire. So you only need 2 things for success: insight and perseverance. Everything else can be hired.
People think they need money to start a business, and all the time you're saying that no, it's not true, because money are out there. You just need to attract it in a certain way. That's interesting idea. I believe it in strongly. I don't need money to start a company. I need company to earn some money. But people are still afraid about going in. They are waiting for the right moment to start. They are afraid of quitting jobs. So does it mean like business is not for everyone?
So let's talk about fear.
Hmm.
People are afraid of being embarrassed, afraid of losing their money, losing family money, losing this, losing that. Fear is real. I hate these motivational people that say you can overcome fear. The oldest part of our brain, what's called the lizard brain, the central cortex, is a fight or flight fear response. We are fearful people. You're only alive because your great-great-grandfather, when he saw the saber-toothed tiger, he ran and the other guy didn't, okay? So we are fearful people. But think of this for a second. All those fears are real. But you're walking down the sidewalk and a truck is coming towards you filled with dynamite and sharks, and it's going to run you over. What are you going to do? You're going to jump out of the way because otherwise you die, which means you can prioritize fear. You're not worried about looking embarrassed. You're not worried about losing money. You're worried about dying. So if you're going to a job today, a job that pays you enough to show up and not enough to care, and you trade a day of your life, a week of your life, it's going to turn into a year. One day you're going to wake up and you gave up the most precious thing you'll ever have, your life. For what? To live in fear? So if you can keep that existential threat at the top, if you realize that you're giving up, then all those other fears disappear. Because here's the thing. Every day that you wait is one less day you get to work on your future. When I give big speeches all over the world, people go, is now a good time to start a business? And I always tell people, now's the second best time. A year ago was even better, but now it's
even yesterday.
Yeah, because the sooner you start. And then you talked about money. So it's not in Polish yet, but my new book is called Future Proofing You. And where it came from was I get emails from all over the world. My book's in many, many languages, and it's gratifying and it makes me work harder, of people who've changed their lives and had success because of reading the book. But I got this one email from a millennial that said, I could never do this. And it bugged me. So I tried an experiment. I took a homeless immigrant to the US and I mentored him one day a week for a year. I gave him no capital, no business contacts. He had to start a business with no money. I mean, he literally was sleeping on people's couches. He didn't have anything. And he went, spoiler alert, he went from homeless to self-made millionaire in under a year.
Was he from Poland?
Was he from Poland? No, but he was from Europe. And so this shows that everybody starting off probably better off than he was, that it is achievable. There's no, you've read the book, there's no rocket science in here. There's nothing, this is too complicated. It's just a common sense approach that people aren't taught. You're not taught to be successful in school. You're taught to fall in line and get a job and make someone else's dreams come true. I mean, that's really what you do when you go to some other company. You're making somebody else successful. Why wouldn't you want to do that for you and your family?
Mm. I have a problem because if people ask me for advice, I gave him advice. It's like a one sentence, like do it, test it, just have a try. That's end of the story. And other people can answer in like few hours conversation, elaboration about what they can do and so on. And I noticed that people like to listen to other people instead of hearing the right one sentence, just test it. I don't know, just go and test it. So why is that? People are trying to avoid the real job. They don't want to be when the rubber meets the road. They maybe they think when they learn, they think they are doing. When they learn from books or from lectures or from VODs, they are not doing the job. They are listening about the job, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So most people would like to say that they're not successful, that they're not wealthy because it's somebody else's fault, right? I didn't come from the right family. I didn't go to the right school. You know, if I was born in Silicon Valley, of course I'd be successful, but I'm living in Poland. Yet there's successful people all over the world. I met a guy in Africa who his parents left him one night when he was sleeping. He was literally lived on the streets and became one of the wealthiest men in his country. The hard way. It took him a lifetime, but an amazing human being. So there's nothing that's stopping anyone. But if you don't think you can, you can't. So it starts with a growth mindset, because we've all worked with that person that shows up at the office with like a cloud over them. Oh, I had this problem, I had that problem. They wouldn't see opportunity if it was right in their face. But once you have this attitude that you can and the world can, you'll see opportunities everywhere. And you'll seek out like-minded people and you'll make things happen. And I just see this again and again, and there's no shortage of new companies that are started. And all the time, I call them thigh slappers. When you slap your thigh and go, why didn't I think of that? You know, these great obvious things that people come up with, and you go, wow, anybody could have done that. Or my favorite one is, after you build your business all successful, the rest of your life, you'll meet a whole bunch of people that go, oh, I had that same idea.
That's my
Yeah.
father. That's my father. He's
Yeah.
saying that all the time.
And what do you do about it? Right?
Nothing. You just turn on the TV and watch.
So, you know, history doesn't remember people that keep the status quo. My great grandparents were from Poland and came to this country. They came with nothing, you know, and anything that they had felt like success. But, you know, they weren't entrepreneurs. And I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I didn't set out to think I was going to be in high tech. I just realized that you either have to be the best in the world at what you do, which is really hard, or the only one doing it. Because if you're the only one doing it, by definition, you're the best in the world. So in a world that constantly has new things, why not go into a new field? I mean, where do you think cryptocurrency experts come from, or augmented reality experts, or virtual reality experts? There's somebody that woke up one day and said, I will be an expert. And then you hold on to that as long as you can. I mean, I got into crypto in 2013. You know, people ask me how I constantly predict the future. I hang out with the people that are coding it. I'm not guessing what's coming next. Apple's a client, Facebook's a client, Google's a client. I know what's coming. And they're building the big billion-dollar pieces of the future. Think 10 years ago. Could you live without your smartphone? No. You run your life, your family, your home, everything. Yet when the iPhone came out, let me tell you 2 of the top 10 best-selling apps. One was a game with cats, and one was a fart app. Yeah, farts, okay? Meaning nobody could come up with all the things like Uber and all these things that made billions and billions of dollars. So now we're going to have heads-up displays. We're all going to wear glasses that give us information so we don't have to look at the phone anymore. The big guys are fighting for whose glasses you buy, whose system you use. They're not making the apps. Those simple apps will be life-changing for business, for families, for play, for whatever. You just have to solve one problem. Everybody did the hard part. You didn't have to invent 5G. You didn't have to wire the planet. That's all done for you. You just have to show up.
There's a great website, teamforest.com, I think, this is .com, and they create like a graphic templates for websites. It costs from $2, $10, $20. And there's the one guy who's doing it so great that he's the most popular creator of the layouts. And he earns like hundreds of thousands of dollars per month because of the scale. His story is amazing. He just decided one day I will be the best website designer, but I don't want to work as a service. I want to work in this idea of million customers paying me $1 per month. And it works perfectly for him. And I showed this idea to my friends, graphic designers. Hey, dude, just do your job, but after your job for 2 hours per day or per week, just try to create one simple template and just put it in the market and see how it works. No, man, I'm busy. They are busy. There's no place in their heads for new ideas.
So this young man that I mentored, for 1 year, he worked harder than most people are willing to, so he can live the rest of his life in a manner most people can't. He didn't go and watch the game. He didn't watch TV. He didn't even date. Daytime was for selling. Nighttime was for doing the work. And he worked 7 days a week. And was it worth it? Yeah, because the reason why it's called future-proofing you, he's future-proof for the rest of his life. And anyone can do that. People make tons of excuses, right? I ran out of money is like the dog ate my homework. I mean, no great idea ever ran out of money. There's always more capital. And so it's really just about, do you want to have that life that you deserve? Or do you want to make excuses for why you don't have the life that you want? The choice is always yours. No one can stop you and no one can make you. So all that I'm trying to do is ease people's journey, to shorten some of the steps, to show them how it can be done. I'm not smarter than the average person. I'm no different. My dad was a school teacher. I mean, and I realize in Poland, it's even harder because you don't have generations of entrepreneurs. I mean, a couple of generations ago, it was a communist system where, everything we're talking about is like from Mars. And yet the idea of a side hustle even existed in communism. There were always people that seemed to figure out how to make the system work. So you can do this. And so many businesses that start as a basic side hustle grow into something that maybe you don't have to quit your job. Maybe you can do this at nights and weekends. There was a young immigrant to the US who wanted to start his own company, but he didn't know whether he could do it. So he challenged himself, could he live on $1 a day? And so he bought oranges and Top Ramen, and he lived a month on $30. And that convinced Elon Musk that he could afford to try it and be an entrepreneur. Elon and his brother slept in their office. They didn't spend money for an apartment. They only had one computer. It was the website. It was up during the day. And at night, they coded on it. And that basically became PayPal, which sold for billions of dollars. And for most people, that would be the end of the story. He took every penny that he made from that and launched 3 companies. He bought Tesla. He launched a rocket company called SpaceX and another one called SolarCity. He so believed in the next 3 problems he was solving that he had to borrow money from friends to pay rent for an apartment, even though he'd just become a billionaire. And it's that mentality. When I wrote the book that you have, he was worth $2 billion. He's now worth $300 billion in the past 5 years. So there are no limits.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. I wrote down quotes from you, which is, yourself is nothing more than what you believe it to be. You must remove all the internal and external definitions of yourself that limit your progress in life. Can you elaborate about this idea for a little bit more?
Yeah, we all have self-limiting beliefs. You
What
know,
is your self-limiting belief that you noticed that you have?
oh, for me, so I was honest with it. I think I talked about it in the book. Um, my mom mm, lied on my birth certificate to make me older to get me into school. She wanted me out of the house. So by definition, I was always the smallest kid, the weakest kid, horrible at sports because everybody was bigger than me. So I got through this whole thing of I can't be athletic. I hate sports. I'm not good at it. So when I turned around 40, I realized that I had framed my whole life on this belief from when I was 4 years old. I can beat up any 4-year-old. Okay. Right. So I decided I was going to get in shape and exercise and stop having that limiting belief. But we all have those. In third grade, you missed a spelling word, so you think you can't spell, or you weren't good at math, or you can't do public speaking. We all have these things, and they're not true. You are not carved out of rock. We are malleable. We can change ourselves. And once you see how easy it is to change who you think you are, changing your environment, changing the world is easier because that voice in your head has been with you from day one and it tells you you're not good enough. You know, I've looked at the studies and I talk about them in the book, but people with higher IQs don't end up wealthier. People from wealthy families don't end up happier, right? There's no correlation. It all comes down to what you want to do. And, with this young man that I mentored, what was interesting is I knew I had to change his mindset. His parents were on welfare. He grew up on welfare. He didn't have I can change the world mind. And if I wanted him to do it in a year, I needed to do it. So there's a psychological trick called the Pygmalion effect. A professor went to a school, tested all the kids, and told the teachers these 3 students would be super learners, super achievers. At the end of the year, those 3 kids outperformed everybody in the school. But the professor lied. He never looked at the results. He picked 3 names out of a hat, but if you tell people they're special and you treat them special, they become special. So I told this young man, I interviewed over 100 candidates, and he was the only one that had all the attributes to be a self-made millionaire, when in fact, he was the only candidate. But if he saw this older, successful guy with a white beard thought that he could do it, he said, maybe he knows something I don't.
Let's have a try.
And once his first month, he made like $60,000. He could have flown to Europe without a plane. I mean, he was unstoppable from that point. And the power of what you believe is what drives everything in your world, both positive and negative.
Now I'm father of 2, but before I was a father, many people said to me and to my wife that you can do whatever you want because you don't have kids. Now we have kids and we actually do even more. So this excuse, even the excuse about kids, I have a kids, you don't understand, you're single and so on. And I noticed that even people can tell, they believe that the kids are the problem, that they cannot start the business. From my point of view, kids are the energy to make me do it instead of not doing it.
That was my motivation. So my 2 sons were the same age as your kids are right now when I started my first business. There were no jobs. What am I going to do? I have to support my kids. I got to create something. And I wanted them to have a better life than I had. And that was all the motivation that I needed. And that propelled me to the top of the world. When they then grew up and went to college and were successful and they didn't, I was lost. I didn't have a motivation. Like, I'd built big companies. I sold companies. It was like, I'm not money motivated. People think entrepreneurs must be, greedy in money. But then when I realized I could teach people and help people, that became my new motivation. I work with governments to make their policies more entrepreneurial and friendly so that they can, have the right tax structure to encourage investment and make things happen. Because our world's got some serious problems. And it isn't going to be elected guys solving climate change, elected guys solving resource issues, elected guys. Who's going to solve it? Entrepreneurs, right? Walmart's the biggest physical retailer in the US. And when they realized after employees, their second biggest cost of business was energy, electricity, they suddenly went and figured out, how do we save electricity? All right. They took out fluorescent light bulbs, went with LEDs. They took out over $100 million in costs. Okay. They didn't do it to be green. They did it to make money. But the second they did it, then they realized they couldn't market about being green. And their biggest competitor now had to respond. And they're the biggest installation company called Target of solar panels in the world. So going green is a huge opportunity to solve a whole bunch of new problems. I mean, we're using a planet and a half's worth of resources, and we only have one planet. So what a great time to come up with ways to solve things. And it feels amazing when you realize something that you create makes someone's life better. So if you want to find the secret to happiness, solve for others.
I remember when I went to Nashville last time, I have a checklist of places to visit. And it wasn't like museums and so on. I was visiting Target, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, Whole Foods. I was making notes what I are doing differently. And I even did a vlog about it. And there was a couple in Whole Foods, I think. They asked me, what do you vlog about? It's just a shop. No. From my point of view, it's a new way of doing buying groceries and so on. I was like, wow, actually you're right. Yeah. So I was vlogging about simple little things, making notes and trying to broaden my perspective.
There are so many people that I've met that their whole business model was to go somewhere else, see what they're doing that's more advanced, and take it back to their local market. When we created eBay, right? There were copies of eBay in every language all over the world. And eventually eBay bought them all. So all these entrepreneurs made a ton of money. But when I was very, very young, like 19 or 20, I worked with a guy named Jerry Mundy. Canada is the US's biggest trading partner. They're right next to us. But if you ask any American about Canada, they think it's a piece of frozen ice and there's bears. I mean,
hockey fans.
We don't teach anything in this country. So this guy took advantage of that, and he went down to U.S. companies and said, can I have the exclusive rights for your product in Canada? And they're like, sure, we don't sell in Canada, right? And he made a fortune. I mean, giant companies that invented and did all the hard work, he just played on the ignorance that America is such a big market. People don't think of other markets. So there's always a different way. And it's never been easier to amass wealth. But more importantly, it's never been easier to have a positive impact on the planet. And that should be motivation enough.
Some people can start like a green company, and some people can start a company who's helping clean houses, helping, with washing the windows and so on. And everything starts from the first step. Hey, I can help you. Do you need any help?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So, Jay, thank you very much. We spoke for more than 40 minutes. Thank you for your time. I know you are super busy, so I'm super thankful. I highly recommend all people sztuka autoreformy. Buy, have a try it. We did so much effort to translate this book into Polish. It was easier than teach Jay to speak Polish, but we did it. And I'm looking forward for another book. And I think in a couple of months we're gonna have another chat and talk about your new book in Polish, maybe.
I'd love that very much.
Jay, thank you for your time and see you next time.
Take care. Bye.